always when the body falls ill and goes through the healing process, it's aiming for uplifting and expanding the ability of source or divine being to manifest in the field of the relative as our physiologies, as us. And the experience of expansion of consciousness is not very far away from anybody. People can have all kinds of fabulous expansive experiences. What makes the difference between someone who's living that experience and who has the divine expression fuller is integration. Because experiences of expansion of consciousness are kind of a dime a dozen these days. I've noticed a lot of changes in YouTube land. You know, I spend a lot of time in YouTube land because I have a channel. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of changes these days, and a lot of people are running after fast and easy and quick experiences of expansion of consciousness, not doing it from a totally self-sufficient level within themselves, but instead doing that through artificial means. And it's all right, everyone should do what suits them best. But the bottom line is, when one forces an experience of expansion of consciousness, it doesn't integrate in the same way as when one uses technologies of consciousness to expand. There is a healing for the heart right in there. So everybody in the group receives a healing for the heart. And this is the beauty of our group. I love you guys so much. Oh my gosh. So what's happening is our hearts are moving together in tandem to produce a single wave of loving appreciation and recognition of the brilliance and divinity of everyone, particularly the vast numbers of individuals who are awakening on our earth right now and extremely interested in expansion of consciousness and willing to try all kinds of exciting new technologies to expand their consciousness, even those that might be damaging. What's happening in the heart right here is an effortless, graceful flow of that wave. Remember the tide that goes back and forth and holds within it the energy signature of the love of the Mother of Creation. So that love is moving. It's moving out from our group, and our group is functioning in a very coherent manner right now. You know, a lot of us have been doing this together for a while, so we're good. We're good. We fall into that tandem very easily, very naturally. And I love it when love moves because it feels so sweet. But what it's doing is it's nurturing and healing and uplifting the wisdom of the individuals in our society who are pushing themselves hard to awaken as quickly as possible, even to the point of making decisions about substances they may be taking or other technologies, austerities they may be doing that could also be damaging. And what's happening is, oh, I feel that was a big wave just came through, and the big wave carries a load of information about time and how gentle the process is, because we have all the time in the universe to do this. I know there's a feeling like, oh, Cook, we have to awaken quickly so that we can like save the earth from climate change and this, that, and the other. But the reality is that the level of nature's functioning where all the big problems are getting solved are bigger than any one of us anyway. And the important thing is the direction and alignment of the trajectory of evolution. Because when that's lined up, even a small little wave somewhere here on the ocean can have a big impact as far as its integrative effect to the whole. Every time we engage with this causal level of our own bodies and we do healing, just as we've been doing, that integrates. that our awareness at that level, and we become more complete. The connection between the absolute, unmanifest field of creation and the whole manifest level of ourself is completed at that junction point, which is that finest level of feeling, level of ourselves. It's like the junction between unmanifest and manifest. And on that note, I want to go back to this form that I was seeing from the future self, right? This beautiful, exquisite, in some cases, multiple forms, which are involved in the process of attaining wisdom, in expanding understanding. I'm just reading them as I'm seeing them. And of course, perception, very most lucid and clear perception in the finest levels of the field on the ocean of consciousness and all that has to do with perception. And the first thing I'm seeing, we're going into a healing now. It's an extension of that last moment that we were healing before, which is for the heart. So you see, I thought I'd gotten off onto a tangent by talking about doing a healing for everybody who's on this awakening path right now. And what I realized is, no, that was necessary, because what it did was it unified our group, and we all had this big heart wave that came forward together in our collective. And what I'm understanding right now is that enhancement of perception is founded on sensitivity of the heart. So we actually did that to set ourselves up, to set up our own healing space for the healing that we need to do now, which is to integrate the connection between this great big heart center flow, which we're able to experience in a more sort of tidal wave, in a more complete and expressed way in our group, in our collective, and connect that with the entire sensory process. And so as I say the words entire sensory process, I'm watching the connection start to take place as it moves up into the brain, up into the inner brain, and into the various cortices of the brain, which are connected to sensory experience. I'm seeing awareness starting to focus in a little bit and settle in the inferior parietal cortex, which is called the homunculus. And that is also known as the screen of life. So just a little bit of physiology here, and I'm not a doctor, so I'm not the big expert on it all, but this is kind of basic elementary stuff, is that the various senses of perception take in information, each in their own spectrum of the electromagnetic field. That information is processed in distinct areas of the brain. For instance, the eyes take in information, and the occipital cortex is back here in the back of the head, and the ears take in information, and that information is processed in the, I believe it's the superior temporal cortex, which is the auditory cortex there, and so forth. That information then comes together in the middle of the brain where the thalamus is. The thalamus, yes, the thalamus. And the thalamus is like a server. It's like a server. It brings all the bits and pieces together, and then it, in an integrated manner, brings them to the homunculus. And I think the thalamus is just sorting. It's sorting and categorizing information and then sending it where it needs to go. Because some information, of course, all the sensory information, certain aspects will go to the homunculus, but other pieces of information that come in, such as emotional information or other types of information, will go other places. Like, oh, I won. Part of that is physical senses, and part of that is just the awareness of it, right? So the homunculus is the spot where all of that sensory information culminates and gives us a holistic picture of the present moment. So I'm feeling a lot of energy starting to settle in in that inferior parietal cortex, that homunculus. And bliss is flowing there. And I'm seeing what looks like meridian or nadi channels, energy channels. Energy channels are opening up and starting to form. More of them are coming in, also blood flow, coming into the homunculus. I'm definitely seeing more blood flow. And with the blood flow is bliss, because the circulatory system really represents the flow of bliss in the body. So that's happening. And the flow of bliss, very nice. Oh, of course, that makes sense, right? Because we had heart awakening, and then the channels open up, and the blood flow goes to the inferior parietal cortex. And this also, the blood is acting physically a little bit like a connector between the wisdom of the heart and the understanding center of the heart and this homunculus area of the brain. And we could say that the integrative ability or capabilities of the homunculus are related to understanding, because the homunculus puts it all together. And when it's all together, we get a whole picture. And that's it's a very subtle understanding. It's a subtle level of understanding. So in the homunculus, that analysis, there's a kind of element of the analysis and synthesis that's going on there. There's an element of it. Synthesis. It synthesizes. Okay. The homunculus synthesizes. I was going to say the thalamus analyzes, and it does to some degree, but the parts come in bits and pieces anyway. Actually, no. It starts with just the experience. So yes, it starts with the whole experience, and then it comes and it breaks into all its different parts through the senses of perception, and then they culminate at the thalamus, and then that goes to the homunculus, and the homunculus really synthesizes and puts it all together. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So I'm asking being, if this is what's going on, and this process is kind of like becoming enlivened and awakened, and we're looking at it under the microscope, what I'm asking being is, besides the fact that rich love, that sweet love is behind it all. Why are we doing it? Why the system is doing it like that? And the answer is, this is a healing for the entire sensory process from start to finish. The whole system, the whole sensory system from start to finish is getting a kind of like a lube job. It's getting all the pipes are getting cleared out, and awareness is flowing through, and there are subtle body intelligences which are responsible for each of those different steps in the process and for the system as a whole. And so this is what the awareness is now shifting into. So once the lube job has taken place, which has happened, now awareness turns and it looks at the overseeing intelligence of the sensory system. Good. And we can give different names to that overseeing intelligence, all those deep-seated, very abstract levels of body intelligence are like sentient life force within us. Sentient life force within us. We're like this whole picture, right? And those are like some of these little sections in here, like that. So these structures, these subtle intelligences that reside at the finest feeling level of ourself, responsible for the various functions in the physiology, they respond, the intelligence within us responds to love. Oh, no surprise there. And the value is to awaken a flow. We want to awaken and establish and integrate a consistent flow of adoration and support and protection and acknowledgement and recognition and joy in the relationship between the whole self, who we know ourselves to be, and this very specific aspect of our own intelligence that's responsible for the sensory system. And then in all of its parts. So there's like a intelligence for the whole system, and then there are intelligence for each of the parts of that, and down as fine as we can go. And what I'm doing is making an appeal within myself to the field of pure silence, that we can take that with our awareness. We can go down to the finest of the finest of the finest of the finest. We want to go down to parts that are so fine, so delicate, quantum level. We want to go down to, right? Because we're looking at a system, so it's like organs and tissues and cells, and then subcellular structures and molecules and atoms, and then finer. We want to go all the way into the finest along that spectrum. And establishing relationship. That's what we're doing. We're establishing relationship. We're coming to know this aspect of our own intelligence and adoring that and cultivating that and supporting that. There is within your heart a sacred space for this particular relationship, just like there is for every precious relationship. There is a sacred space for the relationship that we have with our own sensory capabilities. And so that space can be seen as the kind of integrated structure of the whole relationship. So we're looking at it more as a whole right now. And what we're doing is, as a collective, it's just very beautiful. You guys are activating and exercising higher levels of technology than we have ever done before in these sessions. Thank you. I love you. I shall describe. Okay, so this sacred relationship between ourselves and the intelligence of our being that oversees the system of perception has it has kind of an archetypal form. So we have our group, and each person has their own unique relationship with their own sensory system. Okay, so like some people's, all their senses are working at maximum, fantastic 20/20 vision, etc. And other people all to varying degrees of maybe not as much, and with all their different senses. And so everybody's got a different current state. But all of us are pooling together. You guys are doing this. I'm watching this happen. It's very interesting. We're pooling together our sacred relationship with the intelligence that oversees that system into a kind of a collective wholeness that's sitting in the center of our collective. So even though we're physically not sitting in a circle, when we're in the webinar setting, we tend to kind of arrange ourselves into a sort of circular form so that we're all facing in. And sometimes we face out when we do those healings for everybody else, right? But at the moment, we're facing in. And what's happening is, it's a little bit like carving a diamond so that it sparkles, carving up a gemstone. That what we're doing is each person presents a facet from their side. So my relationship with that aspect of my intelligence is offered into the center, and yours is, and yours is, and yours is, and yours is, and yours is. And everybody's goes in like that. And then what happens is we collectively are creating it's like putting a puzzle together with lots of pieces. We're creating a larger form, which gives all of us a more complete picture of what that relationship is in its ideal form, like a archetypal form or a template. And future intelligent self helps, because future self knows what that form exactly is supposed to look like. It's supporting. So that each of us can modify. What we do is we're all, this is an integrated process, right? We're each putting our little pieces into the pot in the center. And then the center creates, there's some integration, some synthesis takes place, and a wholeness is created, which has a very powerful energy signature and life force of its own. And then we're all able to receive that energy signature and integrate that energy signature for ourselves, so that our own relationship with the intelligence that oversees the sensory system is able to reset and realign itself in a way which more perfectly reflects the larger form of the universal form. The universal form. And I'm asking the mother of creation, because we've got that flow coming from the heart too, right? So going back to source, we're offering that whole thing. We're offering that whole thing back to source. Source of creation, divine being. And when it gets offered back to divine being, a lot of bliss starts to flow, a lot more bliss. That means a lot more blood flow coming into the brain, which is always good. And the bliss goes to the intelligence. Yes. And that brings in something that I was wondering if we would talk about in tonight's session, which is soma, because soma, which is the finest byproduct of digestion, feeds the very intelligence that is responsible for overseeing the sensory system. So the bliss it's one of the ways, it's one of the forms, it's one of the structures that soma takes. When the bliss flows, then that is soma. And what we're doing is we're enjoying it as it flows, but we're really offering it back to source. And as we offer it back to source, that intelligence, which sits at a very deep, very finest, because we're up here, right? We're thinking, I'm speaking words up here at the physical level, and it's going back, and then it goes and it activates this area as it dives into the infinite field of source, and it heals the very intelligence that is responsible for the sensory perception, for the senses of perception. Now, as that's happening, I'm noticing something that I've noticed for years and years when I do energy healing. And that is a little like a strengthening. There's a feeling of strength, which is sitting right in the solar plexus. It's like a little feeling of stability right there in the solar plexus. So what I infer from this is that, and what I'm doing is being a mirror, right, for everybody. But what I infer from this is that our bodies are working at a very holistic level to support this process. And also, the solar plexus is one of the areas where we connect up with Agni. And we know that the Agnis in the body are also part of the digestive process. So that means an integration is happening for digestion. And this integration for digestion is supporting our ability to continuously produce quality of loving bliss, tenderest sweetness and softness to feed not only, let's hope, not only the sensory system, but the intelligence of the sensory system, but the intelligence of all the other systems of the body as well. And what the answer to this, I'm asking, the answer that's coming back is, oh, well, actually, it's feeding the universal form of that intelligence as it exists in the whole creation, not just in our bodies. So that's why the stability is forming in the solar plexus area to create a platform or a foundation so it goes out to the universe. And so I'm just enjoying that for a minute. That's pretty. That's beautiful. As that happens, of course, the tide comes in, right? Because when we're interacting, what happens is our group was facing forward, right? We're in our circle facing in. Then we went, oh, now it's going to go to the whole universe, and I'll turn around, it all goes out. And then what happens is something like a dance. The in and out and in and out. So there's a kind of a back, the tide starts to flow between universal level of that intelligence for the sensory system and individual levels, our group, and then down to the individual for each of us. So I'm just enjoying that. And when that tide flows like that, it really reflects back to the mother of creation, really reflects back to the most profound and universal level of self, of ourselves. And what I'm feeling the tide doing is it's like settling and settling and settling. And it's very, very gradually, so we can see every detail. It's settling into silence. Utmost tenderness. Nice. Nice. So just doing that. All right. What we're going to do with that, because that was really rich, it was really beautiful. What we're going to do with that is, oh good, I'm checking my time too. We're going to offer that settling of that wave into silence to ourselves in sleep and dream state as well. Because there was so much in that it will require a look-see from the other modes of the nervous system in order to completely integrate and be completely understood and become completely useful and accessible to us. Well done, everybody. That felt really beautiful and complete and yummy and amazing and incredible.